When 24-year-old Phoebe Handsjuk was found dead at the bottom of a garbage chute, investigators were quick to rule it a suicide. But as her boyfriend's story shifted and strange details started to surface, doubts only increased. Years later, another girlfriend of Antony Hampel was also found dead. Her death, too, ruled a suicide. Was it a coincidence or something far more sinister? Today we're diving into one of Australia's most debated modern mysteries. The deeper I've looked into this case, honestly, the stranger it's become. In fact, the inconsistencies and contradictions, in my opinion, point so strongly in one particular direction that I think you'll start to see for yourself as we go. The full case just screams dodgy. But I'd love to hear your thoughts, so let me know what you think down in the comments. Phoebe Handsjuk wasn't just a headline. She was a vibrant 24-year-old from Melbourne, described by friends as adventurous, warm and full of life. But beneath that energy, she struggled with depression, heavy drinking and a complicated relationship with her much older boyfriend, 40-year-old Antony Hampel, a wealthy and charismatic events promoter. And he's the son of George Hampel, a retired Supreme Court judge, and stepson of Felicity Hampel, who is currently a county court judge. The two first met in 2009 at the hair salon where Phoebe worked as a receptionist and Antony was a client. Their connection grew quickly, and just 5 months into dating, Phoebe moved into his apartment on the 12th floor of the luxury Balencea building. But to outsiders, their pairing didn't quite make sense. It's often said that opposites attract, but in this case, the stark differences in their lifestyles left many questioning what truly held them together. Phoebe was an artist at heart. She poured her emotions into painting, writing and journaling. She longed for a simple, authentic life, valuing experiences and human connection over material wealth. Antony, on the other hand, lived in an entirely different world. He thrived on luxury, attending glamorous parties and surrounding himself with Melbourne's elite. His focus was on business, profits and maintaining a polished image to uphold the family reputation. But as time went on, Phoebe confided in her friends, her family and her therapist about her relationship troubles. She tried breaking up with Antony 4 times in the 6 weeks leading up to her passing. She felt as though she simply couldn't live up to his expectations, but each time he managed to convince her to stay. She became increasingly isolated from her friends, and one of Antony's friends has said that his behaviour can be emotionally and verbally harmful. In one of her final conversations, she even voiced his controlling nature. Just days before Phoebe's passing, she told her gran, with whom she had a really special connection with, that she finally planned to leave Antony for good. Her gran advised that she at least return to the flat and end it on good terms, face to face. Advice that she now regrets to this very day. On the 2nd of December 2010, at around 7 p.m, a concierge made a horrifying discovery. While searching for a broom in the ground floor refuse room, she noticed an obstruction from the inside. After several attempts, she finally entered to find the distressing sight of a female laid in a pool of her own blood. Authorities were immediately called, and soon it was confirmed the victim was 24-year-old Phoebe Handsjuk. Investigators determined that she had fallen down the garbage chute feet first, from the 12th floor. Her right foot had nearly been severed by the compactor blades, before landing in the wheelie bin on the ground floor. She had somehow remarkably found the strength to pull herself up out of the wheelie bin, but tragically, she succumbed to her injuries while trying to find the exit in complete darkness. Her death was quickly ruled a suicide, a ruling that the family didn't agree with at all. We're going to explore some very peculiar details soon, but first let's rewind a little to the morning of the day in question. The 2nd of December started like any other. Antony states that he left work that morning at around 8:30 a.m, while Phoebe was still peacefully sleeping. Only minutes later though, Phoebe sent an email at 8:45, and she used the computer a couple of times. At 11:43 a.m, a fire alarm sounded in the building, so Phoebe was captured on CCTV exiting with the dog. This is the very last captured footage of Phoebe alive. As it was a false alarm, she soon returned to the apartment at around 11:50 a.m. From this moment though, Phoebe's exact movements until her death are unknown. But she had plans to have dinner that evening with Antony and her dad, Len. All that is known is that at some point during these hours, she somehow entered the 12th floor garbage chute. But was it suicide? Was it a tragic accident? Or was there actually a third party involved? This is where things start to get a bit strange. Antony recalls arriving home at around 6 p.m. that night. He always kept his apartment meticulously tidy, almost as though nobody even lived there, which is completely different to the disarray he arrived home to that night. There was broken glass on the floor, a ripped pillow, blood splatter on the computer keyboard, mouse and mousepad. There was 2 wine glasses left out on the dining table, and Phoebe's handbag, purse and keys were still on the kitchen counter. Her belongings were accounted for, but Phoebe herself wasn't. Yet, despite this disturbing scene and his girlfriend being nowhere to be seen, he didn't start calling her family asking if they'd heard from her. Instead, he had a beer while calling a few of his friends and co-workers and ordered a takeaway for one. Let's not forget that they already had plans made for dinner that night. At 6:51 p.m, Len, Phoebe's dad, called Phoebe to inform her that he was running late for their planned dinner that night. But the call went straight to voicemail. Just 1 minute later, Len received a call, not from Phoebe, but from Antony. This was the first time ever that Antony had phoned Len directly, and his message was peculiar. It was to say that Phoebe's phone wasn't in the apartment, and neither was Phoebe. The timing of the call, immediately after Len had tried to reach his daughter, struck many as suspicious. At 8 or 9 p.m, Antony's takeaway arrived, and the driver informed him of a significant police presence outside the building. It wasn't until then, 2 hours after being home, 1 hour after Phoebe's body had been found, that Antony finally reported his girlfriend missing. Police delivered the horrific news to Antony. He immediately told them that she suffered with depression and had alcohol issues, that her death must have been a suicide. Police were quickly convinced, and there seemed to be no other explanation. So within just 2 hours, police made statements that her death had been a suicide. A ruling that the family didn't agree with, and with so many discrepancies and contradictions emerging, they questioned the authorities' capabilities to investigate Phoebe's case. Police determined suicide, but the coroner later determined a freak accident was to blame. According to the coroner's findings, Phoebe's final hours involved heavy drinking. She was 3 times over the legal limit with a blood alcohol level of 0.16, and she also had levels of 1 or 2 of the sleeping pill Stilnox in her system. These were Antony's sleeping meds. The coroner alleged that Phoebe had broken a glass in the apartment and cut herself when she was trying to clean it up, which they reckon explains the blood that was found within the apartment. It was then alleged that Phoebe later took a bin bag to the garbage chute, and in her intoxicated state, which they described to be almost like automated sleepwalking, she made the poor decision to climb into the chute by herself, ultimately leading to her death. Phoebe also sustained injuries other than her nearly severed foot, but we'll get onto those shortly. All of these assumptions were made based either on very little evidence or overlooked evidence, again adding to Phoebe's family's concerns. There was a couple of strange findings within the scene itself that investigators almost seemingly overlooked as being odd. The first was that Phoebe's sunglasses were found next to her body. Why would she climb into the garbage chute herself, as they claim, with her sunglasses on? But the more bizarre finding was that Phoebe's jeans were around her knees, and her belt was through only the first 2 loops of her jeans. The family have speculated it's almost as though she was interrupted while getting ready. And surely going down a chute is more likely to make your jeans ride up rather than fall down. As well as this, as soon as police arrived on the scene, believing that Phoebe was already deceased, and claiming the scene was now a crime scene, police declined paramedics' requests to examine Phoebe for any signs of life, preventing an accurate time of death. It wasn't until 9.5 hours later before Phoebe was finally examined, so it was never even fully established if Phoebe was even actually deceased when she was found. But these details were only the beginning of the neglect within this investigation. The blood splatter in the apartment wasn't DNA tested, so there's no confirmation that it was even Phoebe's. The glasses weren't tested for fingerprints, and the contents of the glasses weren't tested either. No phones or computers were seized until a much later date, despite the presence of blood on the computer. So who knows how much crucial evidence was erased from those. There had also been dirty footprints leading away from their apartment that night that weren't photographed or sampled, they were just simply overlooked. They did briefly look into the tradesmen that were working there at the time, one of which had allegedly managed to gain access to floor 12, which isn't possible without a swipe card or without someone at least buzzing them up. Given that they didn't have a swipe card, it was assumed that someone must have allowed him up to that floor. A witness recalled seeing him pressing floor 12 in the elevator, but upon cross-examination, she became less certain. While he was questioned, he denied accessing floor 12, so no charges were ever made. Having said this, Antony's friends and family managed to access floor 12 that night without leaving any swipe records behind, which raises doubts regarding the reliability of the security system and even the accuracy of Antony's timeline. You're possibly thinking, what about CCTV? That's normally a key factor in any case for clarifying timelines and determining third-party involvements. But this key evidence was also neglected. The manager of the building even urged police to take the CCTV hard drive to help with their investigation, explaining that all of the footage is overwritten every 2 days, but still, they left without it. Instead, police requested the footage 2 days later, when the majority of the potentially crucial evidence was already lost. Only 3 or 4 of the 16 tapes were retrieved. Phoebe's granddad, who was actually a retired detective, was especially disgusted by all this lack of investigation. He took it upon himself to dig deeper into his granddaughter's case, to find answers to the mountain questions. He approached the manager and asked to access the CCTV footage himself. She of course agreed, but when retrieving the data, she discovered that the hard drive was missing. They reported it to the police, but to this day, it has still never been found. And this wasn't the only evidence to completely disappear from this case. The concierge that found Phoebe's body was deeply traumatised by the horrific scene and required several weeks off work. During this time, she was repeatedly visited by a man insisting that the death was a suicide. He continued visiting with chocolates for around 2 weeks until she finally told him to stop as it was too upsetting to discuss. She would later tell the court that the page in her logbook for the day that Phoebe passed had mysteriously been ripped out. Phoebe's SIM card from her own phone, which was a Nokia, was another key item that disappeared and has still never been found to this day. Once it was back in Antony's possession, after no examination took place, I'll just add, it soon disappeared. There's a couple of strange things surrounding her phones, so I'll just dig a little deeper into those. Phoebe used 2 phones. She had a Nokia, which was hers anyway, and she also used an iPhone, which was Antony's. On the Monday before Phoebe's passing, she visited her psychologist, who reported that her mood was low and she was distressed about her relationship with Antony. That same night, Phoebe and Antony went to dinner with 2 other friends, which ended abruptly. Phoebe was opening up to her girlfriend about her relationship with Antony, but he quickly shut down the conversation, stopping her from expressing her feelings, and led to an argument in the car park. Phoebe left crying and reached out to an old party friend for a drink. The friend recalled that despite spending 1 hour drinking, Phoebe wasn't out of control. Her phone rang constantly throughout that hour, and feeling annoyed at receiving 27 missed calls from Antony, she threw the iPhone across the street. The screen ended up smashing, preventing the ability to answer calls or send texts. Following this ordeal, she spent the night at her mum's house and returned to Antony's apartment the next morning, when he'd already left for work. Then the following morning, on the Wednesday, and the day before Phoebe's passing, Phoebe's family received a really strange text from Phoebe's iPhone. It read, "Hi family, I am in bed about to sleep, and when I wake, I will transform into the most incredible human being you've ever seen. Not. I will go to hospital. It's safer there. And I hear the special tonight is tomato soup. Delicious, nutritious. I love you all very much, but not enough to send an individual text. Sorry about that, but time is sleep, and I must be on my way. Merrily, 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 life is but a dream." A text that they say didn't sound like Phoebe. A text that had perfect spelling, from a phone claimed to be unusable. Initially, Antony claimed he took the smashed iPhone to be fixed that day, but later changed this claim to that he took the phone the following day, which was the day of Phoebe's passing. But a police officer and her dad Len both recall the phone being at Antony's apartment that night. The phone shop has no recollection of the phone being dropped off, or any records, But Antony's dad, George, remember the Supreme Court judge, presented a receipt for the repair days later. Just 5 days after Phoebe's passing, the homicide squad closed the case, firmly believing the suicide ruling. This ruling in itself led to complications. A local detective tried seeking Phoebe's Gmail records from US government, only to be rejected. The US government will only get involved in the case if it's considered a homicide, so they simply weren't willing to help in this instance. It then took over 2 years before the family finally managed to gain access, but they discovered that all of her sent emails had been deleted by someone. Who knows what else had been wiped from that computer that may have completely changed the outcome of the investigation. Phoebe's granddad, along with some experts, decided to conduct some of their own experiments. They had a duplicate of the garbage chute created, and they had 2 different girls of a similar size to Phoebe attempt to get into the chute. They quickly realised just how difficult this was. The opening was only slightly wider than a laptop, and there was nothing around to hold on to help with accessibility. As well as this, as soon as there was anything inserted, the door would automatically close, only further complicating the access into the chute. But authorities claimed that she did this alone and while intoxicated. They realised that fingerprints would cover the exterior of the chute, but there was no usable fingerprints at all at the actual scene, almost as though they'd been wiped clean. A model finally managed to climb into the chute, but with assistance. She also had to have her arms above her head, which was another contradiction to what investigators had assumed. As we know, Phoebe suffered a nearly severed right foot. But as well as this, she had bruises on her wrists and arms, which resembled grab marks. And she also suffered injuries to her head and her neck. The coroner claimed that all of these injuries were sustained while falling down the chute, but the family argue otherwise. They also conducted an additional experiment, the possibility of someone pushing an unconscious person down the chute. They soon discovered that this was a much simpler task. Reactions and behaviours were also amiss after the discovery of Phoebe's death. Police recall, while taking a statement from Antony, he would continually cry, completely normal and understandable with the loss of your partner, yet they also recall no tears, no redness around his eyes, and no bloodshot eyes. Antony also offered to type up his own statement, claiming that he would be quicker than the police. So upon doing so, his crying quickly stopped and his demeanour shifted, instead becoming calm and composed. A friend of his also recalled in the days after, it was like he could turn his emotions on and off at his own will. One moment he'd be going about his normal tasks, but as soon as someone was around, he'd be curled up on the sofa, lapping up the attention of others. But it wasn't only Antony's behaviour that seemed strange. His dad George was insistent on convincing Phoebe's family that she had committed suicide, that she was unstable. The family have tried challenging the ruling multiple times, but they've struggled to find representation, especially finding a lawyer that would be happy to stand against Antony's dad and his stepmom, both judges themselves. Antony's sister, Chrissy Hampel, was close to Phoebe. She made a really interesting post to Facebook saying, "I just stumbled across my favourite pic of beautiful Phoebe. I miss you, darling. You were a fragile little flower that no one watered. You and your family were let down by the justice system and those who represent it. I only hope that one day the truth will come out so that they may have some peace." Phoebe knew of Chrissy's substance dealing, for which she faced substance trafficking charges following Phoebe's death. But given her family's influence and connections, she managed to evade a conviction, with the court stating potential embarrassment to her family. It really does make you wonder, what else are they capable of covering up? Which leads us to Antony's second girlfriend with a suspicious death, also ruled as suicide. Bailee Schneider was a 25-year-old model, also from Melbourne. She was known for her outgoing nature and active social life, but this too diminished upon dating then 51-year-old Antony. She became secretive and socially withdrawn. On the 24th of June 2018, Bailee's parents recall her being at home on her phone, upset about a recent fight with Antony at a barbecue. She had just broken up with him. Her parents needed to quickly pop out to the shop, but this is when tragedy struck. Upon returning home, they found Bailee's lifeless body slumped against the skirting boards near a cupboard in the kitchen. She had a gold cord around her neck, but it wasn't attached to anything. There wasn't anywhere within the kitchen to tie it to. So when police arrived at the scene and declared her death also a suicide, Bailee's parents were disgusted. They strongly disagreed, but just as with Phoebe's investigation, Bailee's case also faced neglect. They collected no evidence on the day. It took a year before phones were finally seized, and an inquest into Bailee's death was finally opened. But tragically, this inquest also reached the conclusion of suicide, leaving the parents with more questions and no clear answers. Bailee's toxicology report showed that she was 3 times over the limit, and that she had traces of a substance beginning with C. Do you think that the similarities in the deaths of Antony's girlfriends are a complete coincidence? Or is there something much more sinister behind these 2 cases? Do you think that his dad and stepmom have played a role in covering up his involvement, much like their daughter's substance charge?